So my number three is American Pie from 1999, starring Jason Biggs, Chris Klein, Jennifer Coolidge, a whole bunch of people, directed by Paul Weitz and Chris Weitz. And the quick log line is four teenage boys enter a pact to lose their virginity by prom night. Easy and simple. So I put this movie on my list because this movie, when I watched it, first of all, it came out when I was in that age range,
Yeah.
if you will,
Yeah,
a
me too.
teenager,
Mhm.
exploring everything, right? But I think I put this movie in because it represented and represents that sense of freedom, that this country and this culture affords, even though we can be very sort of, having lived here for so long now, we can be sort of tabooish and weird about sex and what have you, or being frank about various things. So there's often this interesting debate between Europeans versus Americans.
Mm.
That said, from where I grew up, from my vantage point, having a movie that's all about youth, finding yourself, exploring a sexuality, having a very frank relationship about all these matters, with your friends, where you can even have a
Mm.
goal like this to, lose your virginity before you graduate, or to have the great relationship that Jason Biggs has with his father
Yeah.
in the movie, like,
Yeah.
which I get it that not everybody has that, but he's, we just did our dad's episode, and
Uh-huh.
he would definitely be in the top movie dads ever.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, totally.
yeah, so all of that was, age is very refreshing, but it still is in many ways, because not many places afford you that kind of, frankness, if you will. And then I would say this movie, as as a teenage kid, if you will, living outside, this was my view into what life at school possibly look like in the
Mm.
US, which, is probably true, probably not true, a little bit of both. But what people wore, the way their dorm rooms look like, I was very surprised and intrigued by how no one ever took their shoes off and just climbed into bed with their shoes on. Like silly details, I remember
Yeah, yeah.
noticing all of that, like how did the homes look like, what have you. It just felt, I mean, I know it's a movie, but it felt sort of real to me in that
Hmm.
regard. Like, it was my view into the world here, because I guess it just hit me at the right time. Watching this movie again in preparation for this podcast, and I hadn't seen it in a very, very long time. Obviously, not all of it holds up, from the non-consensual broadcast of
Yeah.
that situation,
Yeah.
and Jennifer Coolidge getting it on with Finch. I don't even know
Hmm.
how old Finch is in that movie.
18, I think.
18.
Right,
I
they're
mean,
graduating high school, so it's
yeah,
legal. It's
st-
probably legal.
it's legal, but still problematic. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
some of that stuff, but at the same time, if you strip away the raunchiness and the silliness of what have you, I think it's a very sweet movie. There's a sweetness to it. There's an earnestness to it in terms of the relationships between the friends and the dad and Jason Biggs, like we talked about, and also kind of finding love. Like, I love what happens with Allison Hannigan and Jason Biggs's
Oh, yeah.
character. Where sometimes what you think growing up, especially as a man or a boy, and finding sort of your person and what have you means may not be, and also that women are also sexual. And it's not just a boys thing. So I
Hmm.
love sort of how that storyline comes together. The relationship between the boys is great. Chris Klein, who I think I had a mild crush on for sure when I watched this movie way back when, like his storyline of being this sort of perfect looking jock guy, but then exploring his vulnerability
Uh-huh.
and such. Like, there's some like sweet, earnest moments in this movie. I mean, today this movie would probably be a crappy Netflix movie. So I'm actually glad that this movie exists, and it did amazing and is a full franchise in its own right, which is kind of bonkers. Wouldn't happen today.
Right.
So I don't know. I had a good time revisiting it, rethinking about me in that age frame, watching this movie again. So yeah, that's my number three, American Pie, which forever will represent, teenage youth, freedom of exploration that I do associate with America.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to hear you say the things about the film sort of feeling honest and truthful, because I saw this film when it came out, again, similar age to you too, where like the ages of the kids in the movie were basically my age.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually kind of fun following them through the franchise too, in terms of the different, life
Yep.
stages they were going through at the same time. But, looking back on this film, it is actually very interesting how realistic I also feel this movie was. Like, you have a group of friends, but they're not stereotypical, like the jock guy, the nerd guy, the
No.
popular guy. They just all seem like real people. That some, maybe one guy might play in the sports team, but he's not like the jock. So they felt like well-rounded characters, and the banter and the relationship between them, that group of friends, just felt very realistic.
Yeah.
Which, you won't, especially in the 90s too. Like, if you think back on, TV shows like, 90210 and
Very glossed up.
very glossed up, the actors in those shows too. It's like, oh, I'm 18, but the actor's like 27.
Right.
And in this movie, they're young kids.
They're
like they're teenagers. And I think there's definitely a lot of truthfulness that comes through. And there is a sweetness to the film too. So I think it's a good, I like that you chose this film too, because I think it is not, yes, it is a, teen sex comedy. So there's going to be those things in there too. But if you strip all that away, there is something that is very honest about what, a teenager, at least similar to my teenage experience, in terms of with the group of friends and the stuff you talk about and the banter that you have back and forth. So yeah, it's definitely also a little bit of a time capsule of like late 90s with like the soundtrack and the clothes and everything.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Nice little taking me back to 1999. Even so, something was funny, like there was there's a scene where they're kind of going through and showing, I think it was where they have like the webcam that's recording the girl taking her clothes off or whatever, and they're showing the different people's households like watching it, and there's even they have like a pet monkey for no reason. And I was thinking back, like, yeah, and for some reason in the 90s, pet monkeys were just like a thing that was like, oh, and Friends, they had one in various movies. Just like, I don't know why that's a 90s thing and why that kind of went away. But it was like, oh, wow, they had a pet monkey in this movie too. Like, such a crazy thing. So, which I don't think is necessarily representative of the average American household, even in the 90s. So, we didn't have pet monkeys. Actually, maybe in India, there were probably more monkeys wandering around than...
but no pet monkeys and no monkey brains served on the platter at dinners either. So
Right. But
out there.
Yeah, I just thought that was really funny with Pet Monkey. But yeah, I didn't see this film in probably like 20 years or 15 years, and it's still funny. I mean, other than like, yeah, there's some stuff that's a little problematic, but then again, it's teen sex comedy. Like, it's there has to be kind of problematic things in there, or else it's not a teen sex comedy. So I'm not like gonna judge the morality of American Pie, but yeah, I did. I think it did capture a lot of the zeitgeist of '99, and I think, yeah, you really hit on in terms of the authenticity of the film. So good. I think a good choice that as someone who was a teenager in 1999, I think it was a good kind of truthful-ish slice of what that was like. Slice American Pie, no pun intended.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that this felt relatable to you, even though you grew up here, because, I never knew how far off this is from like actual real life. So that's good to hear. But, having gone to grad school in this country, I do think there's something very specific about the American school experience, which, shameless plug, we will have an episode on our school lives coming up at some point later this year. But there's something very specific about that. I've been to school now in multiple places, including obviously India, but China as well. So few programs in Europe as well. And I think there's something different about the American school experience, which I don't know, maybe there's something about how people engage with each other and also their teachers. What roles do parents play at that time? Because this whole concept of, you're 18, so you're a grown up now and you sort of leave home. This doesn't exist in a lot of places. So you're in those transition years where your relationship with all the people in your life is sort of changing in a very dramatic kind of way. Where I come from, if you're not married, you live with your parents till 30, so
I see.
It's a very different kind of growing up. So I don't know, maybe that's something that plays into why the school experiences is so unique in the US, and it sort of shapes you, who you are, the kind of friends you make, the kind of relationships you have, which probably is true anywhere. But I think because you're a lot more independent out there, exploring yourself, exploring who you are with other people of your age, I think it has like a different impact on the choices you make from there on out. Versus, I think in a lot of other countries in the world, your parents still play a very big role in the choices you make as an adult because, you know, you're just with them.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. And I think it is also a thing that is part of American culture, that spirit of going off on your own, being independent,
Right.
You know, going back to the whole like yeoman farmer myth from our
Yeah.
foundings. And I think that is still here in the culture for sure. And I think you're hitting on one of those things that, yeah, there's transition periods in your life where like you're supposed to go off and do something on your own because that's part of, you know, the fabric of America in some way.
Right. As opposed to other places, that's, I mean, now I'm sure things have changed, but when I was growing up, like that was almost looked down upon. Like, how dare you leave your home and your parents, you know, and go do your own thing and find your own identity and individuality. You can do that, but within the confines and bounds of the family structure.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, no judgment, but it's just different.
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, I've definitely felt that, you know, when I see and visit other cultures, there's, I think, more of an importance put on community and family than maybe we have here in the United States, where it's a lot more on the individual and like going off, you have to go off and find yourself in some way. Which, I think this movie is that a little bit too, right? Like it's they're setting a bet with each other to go off and accomplish something on their own in competition with one another, instead of the group, you know, helping each other try to, you know, accomplish the task. They're not working together. They're in competition with one another as individuals, which is kind of the same theme that we're pulling apart here, within the American consciousness.
Yeah. And not to mention the goal being getting laid, which also would not be a goal in a lot of cultures before you graduate.
Yeah.
Or if it would be, it would not be spelled out.
True. Yeah.
And
no, that's totally
discussed
true.
this way, for sure.
Yeah. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.